My name's Magdalen Evans. Although I'm not related by blood to Marianne Stokes, I feel very strongly affiliated with her and very proud of her contribution to this amazing period in British art history. She was a lovely, wonderful, devoted aunt, and she was very, very kind to my grandmother and her brothers and sisters. When I went to university and studied history of art, we were given the advice to do a dissertation on a subject that was interesting but hadn't already been written about too much. So I thought, well, Marianne Stokes seems to fit that bill. Her work, there's a tenderness to it and there's sincerity to it. And it's grounded in fantastic ability in life drawing and portraiture. Marianne is more of an enigma. We don't know so much about her, and she certainly wasn't such an extrovert, confident personality. I think she was probably very quiet and discreet, and judging from the way she chooses and admires, especially her female portraits, I often think that there's a bit of an element of self-portraiture in these works. I like to think of her as being rather an observant person who was probably standing on the sidelines and watching what was going on in the art business. She was very energetic. She was just as successful as her husband in terms of exhibiting abroad. She won a medal at the Chicago World Fair in the same year, I think, as this painting was exhibited. One of the things I remember being fascinated by was the amount of the hay bales. I mean, the quantity of hay in the stable is fabulous. It's a proper working stable. Sometimes you see nativity scenes where there's a little kind of token bunch on the floor of hay that's rather kind of neatly bundled in a little piece of string, like children when they make their cribs at Christmas. It's just a little token. But this is a lovely, you almost can smell the dampness of the fresh hay, and her amphora of water there, and the blue of the top of the rim of the jug, echoing slightly her beautiful lapis lazuli cloak and her dress, and then the sort of the wafty feeling of the gauze veil. And I love that sort of triangular shape made by the halos back to the jug. A lot of designers of Christmas cards hone in on the pair of the angels, and especially the girl in the front with her pretty little right hand strumming the lute. But to be honest, although I love the idea of them playing a little lullaby, I think it's a great accent, it's a very lovely addition, but it's not the central part of the painting. It's almost like they're making the music for you to concentrate on the crucial part. And I love the fact that or Mary herself has put her white gauze handkerchief over the bale of hay so that she can rest her cheek and not have the scratch of the hay. And the baby's quite big. It's not a newborn baby, that's for sure. He's so adorable, and his little fists raised in the way that expectant children do. So I think it's not the morning of the nativity. I think it's a few weeks later, after the flight into Egypt, maybe. So it's not necessarily the nativity manger, but it's the feeling of the sacredness of that moment. And the fact that she's so weary, she's just totally out. She's not just having a doze, she's actually fast asleep. But the baby's okay, he's not suffering, he's quiet and still, and you can feel that as soon as he needs her, she'll wake up again. It's just so marvelous that it's so original. I don't think she was copying anybody else's idea. She's got her own motive here, and she just is doing it her own way, and it's incredibly successful while still being very tender. I like the fact that they're not in a row, the two pairs of feet. The leading angel is very neat with her little big toes pressed together, but the other one is supporting herself on the little slightly slanting mountain of straw, and a bit more diffident, really. And it's so sweet that you can feel that they're probably a little bit grubby, their feet. They're not perfect compared to how the snow white their wings are and how immaculate their little hairstyles are. But the bare feet is the meeting of the sacred and the true world, the real life hardship, perhaps even. I guess that the girls are Cornish angels. I mean, that because she was living in Cornwall at the time. I'd love to find any evidence that we could actually state that these were sisters in a Cornish fishing village who Marianne said, "Can you model for me?" But she had pretty good ideas of what kind of models she liked, and she does have a particular predilection for fine-boned girls with slender, slightly elongated noses. But the baby's face is quite unique. I don't think it's comparable to other babies in other paintings. You know, and he's wise and grave and innocent, which is a great combination. This had been shown by a dealer called Alan Hobart, who ran a very successful gallery in Mayfair called the Pims Gallery. And by the time I knew to ask him about it, he'd sold it to a very good collector of his. And his daughter, Becky Bland, had just had this terrible tragedy of a child who drowned in shallow water. You know, it was one of those awful tragedies. Becky and her husband were so devastated by this, but the father bought this painting to give to them to kind of be a comfort for them in such a terrible time. She rang me and she said, "We've loved it and it's helped us and we've got a lot from it. And now it's time for someone else to own it." She was sad to be selling it, but that's a good thing about collectors, you know, letting go of things as well. And so it's a very poignant story, really, that she'd be thrilled to know it's having a new audience in America now. I suppose I'd like a recognition of the fact that she's sort of slightly detached from the maelstrom of fashion and whatever is going on in the art business that everybody's talking about. There's a sort of ethereal quality to her work, which I like to think is an extension of her personality, that she was obviously very interesting, clever lady who spoke, you know, perfect German. I think she was very good at English. She probably had to speak a lot of French. They went to Denmark, they went to Italy, they went to Holland, and she was a very good chess player. She works really hard. She's a good technician. She's got a wonderful understanding of the solemnity of her subject matter, and she's very wise, but that it's not at all vulgar. You know, there's no sense of the fact that you think that she's just painting for whatever is in fashion at the time, or in order to complete a commission for somebody bossing her around. You know, she's very much her own person.